the freshest podcast on the scene. Now listen to The Government of European Necessity, Part 2 by Morocco Ba.
The American Revolution inspired the French Revolution, which happened in 1789, which excluded the French monarchy from its constitution but included principles of religious freedom and equality by law. New political movements started to form and spread in Western Europe in the early 19th century, where in some cases liberals demanded limitations on governmental interference in the citizens' lives, accompanied with constitutional parliamentary rule. The political instability in Europe was flamed by several factors such as the drastic economic changes which required new organization in the commercial, law and governmental functions. Citizens who progressed on economic innovations wanted to be heard in the political domains, and on the other hand, people who did not gain ground due to the economic changes also wanted to be heard within the political domains, trying to regain the security they had lost. An industrial organized state was promoted within the new political agenda. The Western European governments started to assist in the process of industrialization by changing laws to ease the movement of labor and new technology. Most European governments started to follow a trend of promoting railroad development, technical exhibits, and scientific training. Political instability spread throughout Europe, where nationalist demands aligned with democratic pressures and unrest started to emerge from urban workers. This uprising failed to follow through as the conservative monarchs of Europe regained the grip on European government. After the uprising, many European and Western leaders sought to decrease the need for political uprisings in the late 19th century. Liberals took into consideration that revolt was too much of a risk and were willing to compromise. Conservatives sought to develop a new political consensus, which would have some aspects of the old regime, which included power for the monarch, but in a manner which would not provoke an uprising in the process. They allow parliament but with limitations and would appeal to workers with limited social reforms, in the process also promoting an active foreign policy in the interest of local stability. This furthered European powers and the United States. By the late 19th century, the Republican Party was attached with the identity of imperialist principles. An industrial organized state was promoted within the new political agenda. This increased governmental functions and employees within governments of the West. The introduction of civil service exams, which promoted that applications would be accepted based on skill rather than connections and kin. The increased bureaucracy and employment gave way for governments to widen their regulations towards safety in work environments such as factories and transportation. Education became compulsory until the age of 12. In the United States, the economy needed high school education, and most Western states expanded their public secondary education systems. The relationship between the government and citizens changed, in which the government promoted literacy, where up to 90% of Western European adults were literate, and certain social agendas were promoted, such as in the domestic science programs being introduced to promote national nutrition, hygiene, and the use of doctors. The education systems promoted nationalism, teaching the superiority of their nation's language and history. Better welfare was introduced, replacing traditional groups such as family in the process. The new governmental functions that were introduced required finance, in which the Western governments got from the profits of industrialization. Personal income taxes were introduced for further financing. Functions which were previously performed by family and community were now included within the new governmental functions due to them weakening in the process of industrialization. The rise of socialism was dependent on the work of Karl Marx and other capitalist authors which saw capitalism as an evil. Their work emphasized on the unjustness of low wages and how workers were being exploited by their low wages. Violent actions needed to be taken to rectify this unjustness within society. Support towards socialist parties grew as they allied themselves with other groups to be able to gain moderate reforms, and with this process they became strong supporters of parliamentary democracy. The movements also gained ground, such as the feminist movement, which demanded legal and economic gains for women, such as equal opportunities to education, professions, and the right to vote. Feminism mostly got its support from middle-class women who argued that the moral superiority which they had at home should also be available in the political sphere. Middle-class women also argued against their domestic roles, which gained more voice when the average family size decreased. Small groups of women entered professional roles and challenged the ideas of patriarchy, and a larger amount became teachers and nurses, dominating semi-professional labor, giving women a new role of work. European countries sought to go overseas to find materials in which their own countries themselves could not produce, and due to external threats, they were faced with enemies trading in on the African continent and waging war to have control in the Americas. They took land from the Americas in which they grew commercial crops such as sugar and coffee, in the conquest of which European countries imposed on the Americas and Africa. Missionaries from Roman Catholic areas saw the people of their conquest as heathen and wanted to convert them to Christianity. Wealth gained from goods taken and people that have been converted to Christianity was the strengthening of Christian Europe against Muslim empires that were a threat on the south and east. The main products which Europeans got from European countries were raw materials such as metals, cotton and hemp, which fed the European industrialized machine. Industrialization made Europe the manufacturing center of the world, and European industrialized products became the main focus of colonial expansion. Colonial expansion was fueled by internal rivalries amongst European powers. They feared each other more than any external threats which they had faced. Western and European powers had comparative advantage in manufacturing and war on other civilizations.